Thank you very much, Dr. Donnelly.
Я потом я не увидел.
Ой, butterfly, plus.
А тим, що в Херсоні ми потім...
I don't understand, man.
Lungs, heart, liver, spleen. Looking for кров. What is he on? What is he on? Sorry? Just selling.
Щось є, але я хочу вивести так, щоб було добре видно.
Ти його виведеш, бо він лежить весь.
А от вона. Отут, о, бач. І ота перегородка. Отут є, вон, видно, в принципі. Що там не повинно бути крові.
Може, селезенка жива.
Не знаю, що робиться над нею зверху, бо таке, що вона, типу, бач, розмита мені цей. Між капсулами, але між, я поняв, між селезінкою і ниркою нема. Але то, що селезінка, типу, така мені замета, то поняв.
Може бути, що там...
That is absent in abdomen.
Good. Good to know. This is a butterfly ultrasound. It looks like a sex toy. It is not, but it requires water-based lubrication. You could use a butterfly on a stabilization point. You could use it on a medevac, depending on your scope of practice, the clinician. Here's what you'd use it for, okay? When I took the EFAS protocol, the basic use of these, I can identify internal bleeding, hematomas, organ failure, okay, ruptures. I might use this to identify shrapnel. Where is it located? Bit close to an artery or an important vein, a brachial. It's very common. An anesthesiologist like my friend Sasha, he is gifted. He can run a subclavicular, a central line, just like slipping on a pair of shoes. Many doctors cannot, okay? So they would use a butterfly. More often with the power failures in Ukraine, or when Russians are vaporizing cancer wards, the children, you don't have power. Now you do, because you just plug it into a battery pack. The real value outside of Ukraine, for the first time in history, people from Karolinska Institute in Sweden can see daily, by the doctors who comply, they can see ultrasound images from an artillery war, the first artillery war in history. They have access to this. Yeah, they're $3,000 each, and they have $300 a year licensing. I'm buying them for $2,050, the Global Health Fund, and the licensing is free for life for Ukraine. I'm going to give 9 more to Dr. Donnelly. That's my goal by about September 15th for Forza Ukraine. If you want to support Forza Ukraine directly, they have a 501c. Okay, so it's linked in there. I don't care what an organization is, I care who the people are. And Dr. Donnelly, he's a real inspiration to me. He's taught me, he's enabled me, he's empowered me. And many medics in Ukraine. I hate that. This interview is about him. You can learn more about him. He's just a great person. Support them directly, support me directly, support whoever you want. But that's my goal by the end of the summer, to buy 9 more. So it's $18,000. Dr. Donnelly will send footage, and we can update as it goes along, as it progresses into October. Thanks, guys. Well, Dr. Donnelly, Dr. Stephen Donnelly from Oregon, welcome to my studio.
Thanks for having me.
You may remember I mentioned Dr. Donnelly with the butterfly ultrasound. That video was viewed with 35 Brigade in Kherson. And Dr. Donnelly was so kind to send me a loaner of his butterfly ultrasound. You financially supported me before you ever came to Ukraine yourself. Mm-hmm. You were available for medical consultations through like Instagram
Video consultation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, eventually you came here yourself and fell in love.
Yes, that's correct.
And I'm not trying to preload this interview, but one thing I like about you, if it's correct to assume, you hate bullshit. You hate the bureaucracy of American medicine.
Correct.
So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and
Sure.
where you come from and how you became such a amazing man?
Oh, thank you. It's interesting to start. So I remember when the war started, the big war started, I was working a night shift and I just was like, I need to go there. There's a feeling inside me. And I was just like, no, I have to drop everything and find a way there. Mm-hmm. So I scoured the internet, finding ways to come. I actually contacted like multiple embassies, letting them know what I could do. And eventually, through a friend of a friend, was able to make contact with a group that was here. Came here in May of 22 and fell in love and never wanted to leave. And so I came back again in August and then moved here in March. So I like quit my job, quit my job as an emergency medicine doctor in Oregon, and then moved here in May and have been teaching doctors, nurses, paramedics, and all types of everything from pre-hospital care like TTRC to ATLS. And now I'm teaching like westernized emergency medicine to the doctors in Kharkiv and
I've seen
Kharkiv
this.
Oblast.
They're young. They're young. They're relatively young and fresh.
Yeah, and that's the best part. The younger group knows that what they see in medicine can be better, and so they look to the Western medicine. They look to the like Europe, and they look to the U.S. and the kind of like that's their bar and they're trying to get there, and so it's nice to be with them, to kind of advocate for them, to get them up to speed on what we do, and then like, you know, I have no military experience before. I'm just a civilian. I can't go kill Russians.
You could.
I think I'm a liability right now, but the point I wanted to make was like I want to push back against what's happening, and there's a lot of Russian influence in medicine here. There's a lot of Russian influence in how people are taken care of, and so to be able to change how Ukrainians take care of Ukrainians in a Ukrainian way would be so much better. And so that's my mission here. Is I'm trying to teach people to treat people like we would want to be treated, and I don't see that often. I see it more now. I'm meeting the rare people who want to push for talking to patients, being with them.
Yes.
And then using Western medicine, using evidence-based science to take care of people instead of opinion, or this is what we did back in 1983. So that's a big push for me, and I see that changing little by little. But it's a lot.
Do you see that like with the casualty care, for example, here? Even me coming from no medical background, getting thrown in. I was very privileged early on in the war, but like it, except for talking to a conscious casualty with just the card, what brigade are you, what battalion, what rota, what's your name, that's all we need to talk to you about.
Because they asked me, they're like, well, why do you talk to patients so much? And I was like, it's first day of medical school, you learn that like your patient is important, you know that your communication
it's part of your assessment.
And so it's changing, right? It's just that, again, that mindset of what they were taught. And if you think about medicine, really takes a long time to change, right? They've been in an independent country for over 30 years. That's not enough for medicine to evolve from all the doctors that have learned, right? So there's this new generation coming up that are, it's funny to say this, they're like 15 years younger than I am, but they're the future of medicine here in Ukraine. And so to have this ground, to be at the ground level with them, to work with them, to show them what it's like, and you can actually see the difference in even how they care for patients versus the older generation of doctors here. But even on the front lines, when talking with the doctors that work at stabilization points, there's still a big push to get whole blood going. And there's that is a
blood products are virtually non-existent.
And it depends on where you are. And so trying to push the idea that, like, you know, if you can get trained as a medic to draw blood, learn how to do like a match, that's a huge win.
Yes.
And it's spreading. It's out there.
I've never done a blood card.
Yeah, the blood law is passed. There's lots of more laws that followed up with that. So even that's some of the conversations we have, is just telling doctors like, hey, you can do this now. And they're like, no, we can't. I pull up the law that recently passed in 2022.
Yes.
And I show them and they're like, oh, I had no idea that this was law.
Never got passed down.
Yeah. And so that's another part of just getting that knowledge out there. And then once they get the knowledge, they get the skill, then it's the logistics, which is why I like what you do. You bring what people need, like the butterfly. You identify that need, it's crucial. There's not an emergency department in the US that does trauma that doesn't have an ultrasound. That's the standard of care. And so to be able to help out with that, I was happy. I was like, finally I have another home for this ultrasound for the time being.
You had been here, you had left, you had taken leave from your job, you used up all your vacation to come to Ukraine, correct me if I'm wrong. Then you took unpaid leave here, and then eventually you came to the point where you just outright quit your job. Like I say, like, oh, how do I come to Ukraine? Screw you. Why do I have to tell you? You'd probably take a plane. It'd be quicker than a boat if you're from America. Why are you writing me? And it's like, if you really want to come here, sell your house, sell your wife, sell your life.
Yeah.
But you're at that stage now.
Yeah.
You're here now, like
Yeah.
full time.
Yeah, I have an apartment, everything. Yeah, my car's coming hopefully soon. My fingers are crossed.
What, you're importing your car?
A car, yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, you have to. You can't buy one in Ukraine.
No. So
But how did that happen? Like how did you cross the barrier that you're going to go all the way here?
a combination of things. So, COVID sucked. COVID
Yes.
was terrible. I had every doctor, every nurse can tell you about the one patient that they can remember from COVID that really kind of changed how they saw everything. It was hard. And what was hard was that the public didn't support us. Right. That's what killed me. I think with COVID really killed my desire to really be in the emergency department was I watched us give everything and the public not be there.
And people just shit on you. Like
Yeah.
It's your fault.
Yeah. It was my fault that they were sick.
Pandemic and government policy is your fault.
Yeah. And we took the brunt of that. And I tried finding ways to recover. But it just medicine didn't feel the same for me anymore. It became a job, and I was an engineer first. So that was a long time ago. But I was an engineer, and I was
Look at the brains on you.
and I was like, I'm not going to say an engineer because this is just a job. It's not a calling. It's not what I want to be doing for the rest of my life. Here in Ukraine, this is a calling for me. There was something one day inside me that I answered. And then I kept following it and following it and following it. And before I knew it, I was like, this is where I need to be. This is where I feel most at peace. This is where I feel more calm, despite everything that goes on here. But I kind of just got burnt out in medicine, and American medicine, the way we deliver it. I think the medicine we have is amazing. Like we make people live better lives. We actually treat people really well. We have great technology, but that's only in the context of how your hospital administers that, how they take care of the doctors, how they take care of the nurses. And across the board, even talking to my friends who work on the East Coast, Midwest, South, and then where I practice in the Pacific Northwest, everyone felt the same way. And so I knew it wasn't just me, it's across the board. And I couldn't imagine living the rest of my adult life into my 50s or 60s that way. And so I came here, and luckily I've had great opportunities, great experience, met great people, cultivated relationships.
Yes.
And this is where I feel like the real work is. This is why I got into medicine. Right? I got into medicine to help people. I got in medicine to make a difference in the world. And this is a strange part. I'm a huge history nerd.
Yeah.
In my free time, and I always remember my grandparents talking about their World War II stories about what they did. Like my grandfather was a gunner in a bomber, like one of the most dangerous jobs to have. And he
Yeah,
made it
no
through.
shit.
And then my other grandfather was on a transport boat that got blown up in the Pacific.
No shit.
And so I had these stories, but I never had a desire to go into the military for various reasons. But there's something about protecting other people, whether it's in medicine or whether it's just getting them the right equipment or the right people. That to me speaks to me. That's been part of me for as long as I can remember. So I love helping people. That's probably the selfish part, is I get personal satisfaction out of this. And I think that's okay. And that was something that wasn't really emphasized in medicine. You just do medicine for the other person.
Yes.
And then once you start realizing that no, to be sustainable, to do this long term, I have to actually enjoy what I'm doing. And this is something I enjoy, and I don't have to be sad about it or upset about it. I can actually enjoy it.
Do you feel like your work here is kind of like someone took the shackles off?
Oh, for sure.
When I first met you, you had, I don't know if you can name the organization, but like you were wearing fancy designer sportswear, and that was sponsored. You had like $1 million worth of TACMed supplies, and you had minimum 50 butterflies, which are like 2,000, 2,500 a pop. Retail, like someone would pay $3,000 for a butterfly, like if you just off the shelf, and you're training people on it, and you're giving it to them, and like that was one of the sweetest gigs I've ever seen here in this damn country. You know what I mean? Like, if you could have just done that for the rest of your life, you know, you would have been well dressed.
Yeah, it was okay. The hard part is,
but for what it was,
for what it was, like what we did for those like 2.5 months of ultrasound training, pre-hospital training, we learned a lot. I have the great people I worked with.
Yes,
they were amazing. So like the team I work with now, Emily and Mike, they're the ones that are really like, that's a huge takeaway from that. Plus the interpreters we worked with were also super solid.
Yes.
And so
I've met 2 of them before.
Yeah. So we formed a really great, strong bond. And we all had a passion. And that's what made that trip so great, is we all had the same passion. Regardless of who we had to report to, we still had a great team. We still made the best of what we had to do. But we took lessons from that. And we're like, if we're going to do this, we now know where the need is. And that's, training either the group medic, who we eventually learned isn't actually a paramedic. They're usually just like the best you can put on tourniquets and pack a wound.
Yeah, the term paramedic in Ukraine, I just call myself a paramedic now because it's easier for...
It kind of gets the point across. But once you start learning the lingo that they use, it's like, okay, there's a guy who's better at some medicine, and then you actually get maybe a felcher, like someone who's a basic EMT, we would call. Once we started figuring that out, then we were able to target our audience better. And we're like, okay, we know what the need is. We know that people need good, solid, basic, all service member skills.
Yes.
But we also identified like there were some people who got that basics and were starting to grow, but couldn't grow beyond that. And that's where our group came in. We were training the higher level procedures. So blood transfusions, how to actually do that safely in the field, how to convert a tourniquet. That was another big thing that we're trying to push now, is tourniquet conversion.
Yes.
Because of feedback we get both on the ground.
How many amputations have we had in this country?
Who knows? A lot. And so that's where we fit. So we were able to, like, from the ground up, the group of us get together and say, like, well, how do we want to make our impact in the way we want to do it? And that's what we were able to do. We had that, like, 28 days we were together in July, and like I think we trained for like 25 of the 28 days.
Boom.
And we trained over 750 people, and we did it for $45 a person, which you couldn't go to a high level course like we do for $45. You'd be paying $800, $1,000.
Oh, like it's
for a course.
It's this whole country, like the training, you know what I mean? Like I've done chest tube on a pig. Do you know what I mean? Done crike on a pig. I've never actually done one in real life, but it's like, you can't do that shit in America. Do you know what I mean? Like you can't.
And the way we teach too is we try to identify those that are good, that are doing well and excelling, and we say, like, it's now your job with your skill set to continue to teach not only the people you're with, but the next medic who's on your team, passing it forward. So we've had this. I'm forgetting the term, but basically, we're able to find people and train them to be trainers. So we're training the trainer. Force multiplier, right? We're turning into that. And as we continue to work with people, we're able to make that more and more and more. Because I think our ultimate goal is, like, if we could have enough Ukrainians with the skills we have, then we're not needed.
Yeah.
And that's like the biggest thing for me, is like, we don't have any financial gain from this. We don't have any financial benefit. So for me, it's like, I want to give everyone the skills, because at some point, like, I have to go home and be with my family. So like, my dad has lung cancer.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that again tonight.
Yeah. So stage 4 lung cancer, and he knows why I'm here, because people are like, well, don't you want to be with him? I'm like, if I was in the US working my normal job, I wouldn't have the opportunity. I spent a whole month with him after his diagnosis and complication, that I would have never been able to do before. It would have been nearly impossible. But that's so he understands what's going on with that, and I have the full supportive team, and everyone I've been working with has been super supportive of that. But even in the context of that, it really shows you that, like, you never know when your last day is going to be. You never know what's going to happen. And so that's the other part that I find interesting here is you're always in the moment. You're always in the day. You're like, what am I doing today? What am I?
It's freeing. It's so
Yeah,
freeing.
it's
isn't
so
it?
freeing. Because I'm not thinking about 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, because that's what I was doing before in my past life. Now I'm in the moment, and it's really nice.
Do you find a disconnect, like, because when you work with groups and organizations, you have to have communications with other people who are kind of involved in America, and do you find it more difficult to communicate with them now? You know, like, I don't know, we used to have a saying like island time, like it's much slower, but Ukraine time is, they want to talk about something like a month, or they want to implement something 6 months down the road. Can you even entertain that in your head?
No, it's hard because they would want us to do like certain safety protocols, and we're like, we just can't achieve that here. Like, we're doing the best we can, and we followed other groups. So like MSF, we're like, yeah, if there's an explosion during an air raid, we'll go shelter. I was like, that's so much more reasonable, because we were waking up at like 3 a.m. to go shelter.
Because MSF, they're all like protocol, like that hinders their work. It's like, no, you have to be in a shelter.
Yeah.
You can't be 50 kilometers within a Russian.
Yes.
And I hear MSF does great work. I was so sus of them, but there's one girl in Hospitalers who did work for them. Their aftercare program is fantastic, because they've got billions.
Yeah, and I've never worked with them. I just remember meeting with them, and they gave us a lot of their policies. I'm like, this makes much more sense than the policies that back in America, because we had lawyers.
Yes.
Who we had to follow their rules because of their insurance they had on us. So you get your hands tied when you get that. You know, it's nice to have all that money, but it usually comes at a cost. And we weren't hitting the target audience. And so once we were done with that project, we're like, we have this great educational system, let's put it where it is. And so we were out near the front, 5-6 kilometers, training, doing TACMED training.
You have a lot of autonomy what you do here.
Yeah.
And how does an office in New York know what needs to be done? Or...
Oh, that's such a hard part. So luckily our team leader, Mike Piat, shout out to him, because he's just a solid dude who really knows how to try to grease the wheel. So he's been in DC, he's talked to USAID, he's talked to DOD, he's talked to these people. And it's so hard to find money right now. Even USAID was like, we're asking around too. Because it's hard in this country, because you want to support the civilians. That's important too, but the way to really support the civilians is to get Russia out of Ukraine.
Support the army.
Yeah.
Like when you used to help government employed doctors.
Yeah. We were the rule was not training anything military, but if there was a government employed doctor, they were okay to train.
Government employed doctor. It's like they're on a different planet.
Yeah, and I understand where they're coming from, understanding how the American system works, but the American system doesn't work here. Just like American TCCC doesn't work here. We have the Ukrainian lessons we've learned that we can pass along to other Ukrainians. So tourniquet conversion being a big thing. Tourniquet conversion isn't for an all service member, but it has to be here, because they'll sit for 6 or 8 hours, right? And in that time frame, you have the opportunity to save someone's limb.
Well, it's like by the book. I learned the course, and then I realized it didn't work. So when I was teaching people and you had limited time, it's like, right, you got to do bleed right away, and then our next biggest issue is hypothermia. If they've got an airway issue, you got to deal with that, but most of the time they don't.
Yeah.
So just go from blood to hypothermia.
Yeah.
That's my personal experience.
Yeah.
I've dealt with a bit of blood.
Yeah,
and it's like, this is what you guys needed to go. No,
and that's the big thing we try to push too. Is like, if you can stop bleeding and you can give blood and keep the patient warm, you're going to solve so many problems. The airway issues, the breathing issues, they're much less of that percentage. But if you just do good wound packing, so like some of the feedback I got last,
and a lot of airways casualties we can't help anyway. It's such a drain on resources.
Yeah. So last November, when I came back and trained with the group that I trained earlier that spring, they're like, "Oh yeah, just a couple days ago, we packed wounds on 4 people and saved their lives." And I was like, "What?" Because I have my catchphrase is, I say tisk tisk tisk, pressure pressure pressure.
Okay.
And so when they see me, that's how they say hello to me. They're like, tisk tisk tisk, and I'm like, "Oh great." And then they tell me the story, and I'm like, "Oh, my catchy little phrase actually sticks and works."
I like that.
So and that's the thing, like, it's not a hard skill, but if you've never done it before, if you've never seen a massive bleed, if you've never touched someone who's about to die, you don't know what that's like. But if you give them the skills, you give them the training, you give them the practice, you give them the experience, they're going to do it. And these people, they weren't the medics, they were the soldiers. These were the basic
Yes.
infantry. And the medic, they said, oh, the medic was too afraid to touch the patient, but our guys, because you trained them, took care of that guy. And I was like, all right, what we do matters. I have stories of surgeons like, hey, put your hand up here and you can feel the patient's heartbeat during a surgery. So it's in a very controlled, safe environment. But the
Yes.
idea is like, you're not going to learn unless you have training before to prime you to then get your hands on. And that's what I really like now with my work in the hospitals. I'm working next to the doctors at the bedside. And so they not only have someone to kind of bounce ideas off of, but
Real-time shit.
yeah, but I'm there to give them real-time feedback, ask them questions that they aren't usually asked. And, I've showed some new techniques that I watched another doctor teach to a medic. And I had no idea that he had learned this. Like, had no idea that he actually was watching me when I did something. And then he's like, oh yeah, Dr. Steve taught me this, so I find this to be a lot easier, so this is what I'm teaching you.
It's
So-
cool.
And it's all basic stuff. And that's the thing, like, if you start with the basics and you have solid basics. And that's what we've been finding hard here. It's like, we'll train some great medics, but then they end up dying.
Yeah.
And so we're in this constant cycle of going through this, of always mastering the basics. So now we're at a point where our group is coming back. So Emily, Mike, Bodon, Victoria, and I
Oh, nice.
we'll get back together. And Finch, I can't forget Finch. We'll get back together, and we'll go in March, do the same training.
Go through the whole cycle
Go
again.
through the whole cycle again.
That'd be so cool.
Yeah. And so,
It's so cool.
yeah, so that's our focus now. And until then, like I said, my job is to work in the hospitals and train these doctors up on Western medicine, our protocols, procedures, and medicine. And it's been interesting to learn all this stuff and see what they do, but I can see the small changes happening, just little by little. And the great part is we meet Ukrainian doctors who are like all for us. They're like, Western medicine, this is where it's at. They use science. I just talked with one today who was like, think about what you learned in medical school. What Dr. Donnelly's going to teach you is going to be even beyond that. And I was like, oh, this is great to have your support here, right?
Yes.
Sometimes I run into the like, these Americans, they have fancy medicine. So just listen to them, but this is how we really do things. And I'm like, no, you can actually do these things here. And then you show them at the bedside and they're like, oh, this does actually work.
I didn't know the dosage on something once, so I asked somebody when I was preparing for another wave to come in, and my commander at the time, Brandon, you're incompetent. You should know that. It's like, so you rather I just guess, and because I've got to load up every one of those spritz, and it's anyway.
And again, that's a holdover from the Soviet Union of wanting to have an answer for someone because they're pressuring you and you don't want to let them down.
Yeah.
So what I teach, and I say this all the time to my students, is like, when we're in the sim lab, it's a mannequin. I was like, you're not going to kill them anymore.
Yes.
Right. So I want you to make mistakes, because in my training, when I was a medical student resident, I killed tons of fake patients because I didn't know, and that's okay not to know. So when you put them in that mindset of like, hey, I'm not here to judge you, I'm not here to grade you, I'm not here to be your professor. I just want you to learn, because that's what's going to make you a better doctor. And so I encourage people to make mistakes, because you're in a controlled setting. You're not going to actually harm anyone. So, and you're going to learn more from your mistakes, because there's this emotional element to it. Because you'll be like, oh, I did mess up, and this is how I felt. So now next time when I'm here, I'm like, oh, I remember how I felt this one time, and this is what I need to do differently. The system in Ukraine compared to the US is very different. They're still divided with regards of who goes where. So in the US, every patient who presents to the hospital goes to the emergency department.
Yes.
Every patient that comes to a Ukrainian hospital sometimes goes to the outpatient clinic. Sometimes they go right to the medical floor. Sometimes they go right to the surgical floor. Sometimes, like a heart attack, they don't come through the emergency department. They go right to the cardiac ICU. Part of that is because their emergency medicine doctors are on the ambulance. So they're seeing the patient. They're getting the history. They're the ones calling the hospital saying like, hey, I have a STEMI. Bypass the emergency department right to the cardiac ICU. What comes
That's
into
better in a sense.
Yes and no. So they anchor. So there's a lot of anchor bias. So part of what I teach is like, just because someone has chest pain and EKG changes doesn't necessarily make it a heart attack. Yes, STEMI for sure, but there are mimics, aortic dissection, pulmonary embolus. the only people who think about these are the emergency medicine doctors, because a cardiologist, they think about the heart. The
Of course.
neurologist only thinks about the brain. The internal medicine doctor, they also think broadly, but they're long-term care. They're not the acute phase. So what I try to teach is the approach of an undifferentiated patient and what's going to kill them first.
Yes.
And so we go through that, and that's a huge thing for them, because they know a lot when it comes to making a differential diagnosis, but they don't always put it in the right order. And so that's why I'm there and be like, okay, well, what's going to kill the patient? And they're like, and then they think, and they're like, oh, actually, this is going to kill the patient. I'm like, great. How do we work that up? What do we do for that? Ultrasound. I'm like, great. You're learning. You're putting it together that you can take the ultrasound, look at the heart, look at the lungs, and within 2 minutes, you've ruled out a couple things. And then it's safe for them to go to the cath lab. And the Soviet mindset of the hierarchy. I've been here the longest, so I have to be the one in charge. I have to be the one to know everything and do everything. I can't make mistakes.
I'm an ophthalmologist. Oh, well, that's a...
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think what happens though is once you start breaking through and showing them some things. So like we had a long discussion with an older surgeon yesterday about how to work up anemia, and the interpreter I was working with was like, I feel like we were just banging your head against the wall. And I was like, I hear you, but what did he come in after? I thought he was ordering a test he didn't need to order, and he actually came back and kind of sheeply said, oh yeah, Dr. Donnelly, you were right. And I was like, and it wasn't anything like malicious. We were having a great like collegial discussion, but he was very insistent that because I learned this once in medical school, this is what we have to do.
Yes.
And so after that, I was like, I'm kind of putting myself out there, because if he's right and this is actually a positive test, that he's going to be like, see, this like doctor doesn't know what he's talking about. But then he comes back and he's like, you know what, like this is the actual results. And that was a big thing for me, because very rarely do people at that high level will admit to not a defeat, but they were admitting that they weren't correct.
Yeah, but this is ubiquitous in all countries' medicine. When new studies come out and you've got a doctor 25 years in, you mean what I've been doing for 25 years, and he's got great results.
Yeah, of course.
But now you can get this. That's quite common in all walks of life.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another part of American medicine that was like drilled into me from medical schools. Like you're always a learner. You're always learning. You always need to be reading. You always need to be studying. You need to pick fields you're interested in, because everything's always going to be constantly changing. So that's another benefit of like being trained in that way, but that training doesn't seem to have like really held on here or grasped here. So that's what we're trying to talk about, is like, you know, yeah, it's kind of annoying that you have this American doctor show up to your hospital every day being like, hey, let me teach you this new cool thing. But when they start seeing the results, that's when they're like, oh, okay. And I know I'm not going to change everything. That's going to take time. It's going to take laws. It's going to take lots of changes. American emergency medicine took like really 30 years to get its hold on like being a well-respected specialty, because before it used to be like surgeons, OBGYNs, internal medicine doctors, family doctors filling in, and that was like the least wanted shift. Oh, I have to go work in the emergency department.
It was like that.
Like
it might even. I remember in Canada growing up, it was like that. My GP would you'd see him doing shifts there.
Yeah.
And it's like he didn't want to be there.
Yeah. So and then over time though, when the specialty started getting residencies and more residencies and specialists, and then everything got made official, that's when we got standing and we started being able to do more. Now we're at this point where, because we're so burnt out in the specialty in emergency medicine, that less people are actually going into emergency medicine. Usually emergency medicine overfills. Like there's usually people waiting for spots. This year, the match, we didn't fill all the spots.
Okay.
So that says something about young students watching what's happening in medicine and realizing, well, why would I put myself in the situation where patients are yelling at me, families are yelling at me, administration's yelling at me, and I go home and I'm tired and I have to show up the next day. So it's a telling thing. I believe that our medicine is still great. I just think the system also needs to change. It's just here in Ukraine, for me, change is still needed. I didn't leave really like to a better system. It's a different system that also needs changes, but the changes are different.
Yes.
And so getting it on this ground level and trying to get involved in everything and making connections, and that's the big thing, like meeting people. You meet heads of hospitals, you meet heads of the Ministry of Health, start working your way up, and you start talking to people and you learn kind of more of the mechanisms, how things work. And and then you can leverage that in your teaching, and that's like a big thing for me, because I'll pull out laws, and they're like, how do you know this law? I'm like, well, I talked to this surgeon who was working at a hospital in Izium who was like, this is how I train my guys down in Odessa. Here's the law. And I'm like, oh, this is great. And as you know, Ukrainians don't usually like to like argue with law. They're like, that's the rule.
Documented.
Yeah. What's the protocol say? What's the protocol say? Now I can point and say, this is actually your protocol.
Yeah.
And so that's another eye-opening thing, I think, for me and in the medical system here. But I think there's room for change here. There's a lot of room for change, and I think there's a want for it, especially in the younger generation.
I have some beautiful, brilliant friends, and they're all younger than me.
Yeah.
You know, anesthesiologists and me are like this.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that all started because one of the medical aid, I don't really accept medical aid anymore, except very specific drugs and TACMed. Because I can't, like, people would give me clinical stuff, and clinical's so complicated, and it's like I didn't come into this world. They're just dick catheters to me. They're not Foley catheters, and I didn't know there was 6 different sizes.
Yeah.
And then there's 2-way Foley catheters. It's like, fuck off. You know, so it's for my own mental health and my own effectiveness. I just stay in my own little thing. But I've seen, my God, I used to get so much propofol. Yeah, 1-2%, whatever, lidocaine coming in, and those were the drugs that people give me, and a bit of ketamine. And so I had all this propofol, so I guess I got to know so many anesthesiologists, you know, and they, to me, and this is my bias, they're the rock star of the show. Like in a stabilization center, a surgeon and an anesthesiologist. A surgeon's actually a really simple job in trauma, because like I don't mean to say that, you know, I mean but it's so simple what he's doing. And anesthesiologist is actually a little bit more complicated.
This is the great debate. Like, any surgeon will say they're better than the anesthesiologist. Any anesthesiologist will say they're better than the surgeon. They have to work together. That's the thing. They have to get along.
Who would you want working with a needle?
It depends on what it is.
Okay.
So I know, like, from the American side of things, I mean, not even just the American side of things. Like, if I need a thoracotomy, I want a surgeon.
Of course. Of course.
If I want a nice sedation to get cardioverted, or if I want nice sedation to have a procedure done, yeah, I want the anesthesiologist. But if I need a really complicated surgery done, I want both.
Yeah, shit.
I can't have one without the other. And that's the interesting part about being here. Like, I don't sit in that world, right? I'm not an anesthesiologist. I'm not a surgeon. I'm the emergency medicine doctor who does a little bit of surgery.
Yes.
Minor surgery. So does a little bit of anesthesia, but not like the full spectrum of things. So I can kind of sit in between and understand both perspective. But I have to agree with you. When you're resuscitating a patient, here in Ukraine, it's the anesthesiologists. They're the ones kind of driving that ship, because they're responsible for pushing all the drugs, pushing all the medications, pushing the blood. The surgeon, their job is to get in and stop the bleeding. It looks easy, but in their head, they're going through so many things. They're saying, I have to run the bowel, I have to look at this organ, I have to look at this organ, I have to check out this blood vessel, I have to pack with this much pressure. How many packs did I use? And you don't see that because they're quiet. And they're just dabbing around.
They're just doing it in their head.
Yeah.
I've worked with so many of these guys now, and sometimes they leave me to take the lead on some of the lighter guys, but I don't play God. It's like one guy the other day, like, there was something wrong. His hand was kind of flapping, and I was like, and I'm looking over, where's Taras? Because there's only 3 doctors there that speak English. We're busy, you know, like 15 casualties, and it's like, hey Taras, can you just come look at this for a second? He's like, normal no. I was like, okay. You know, he's the doctor.
I work in the emergency department, right? I will see on a 12-hour shift anywhere between...
This is in America.
In America, 20 to 30 patients. If I have 15 or 16 patients at once, I can't see everyone at once. And it's a lot of stuff going on. Monitors are making noise. The nurses are talking. The technicians are talking. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of noise. And that's what it is being here. There's so much going on. You can't keep track of everything. But if you focus in on the most important task at that moment, all the rest of that noise kind of drops away. So like, you found your niche here.
Yes.
And all the things you do. I found my niche. And that's why I'm thriving, because I found what I do best.
Yes.
I love teaching. I love taking care of people. That's me. If I do anything but that, I'm not myself. So it's a strange philosophical way of saying it, but like, I found myself because I've had to focus so much because of all this noise. And that
You had to prioritize.
yeah, and that comes from my experience in the emergency department. I can't take care of 15 patients at once, but I can take care of the most important patient. Then after I finish that, then it's the next most important patient. The problem here in Ukraine is there's so many important patients.
Yes.
And there's not enough people. There's not enough money. There's not enough technology. So you have to prioritize what's the highest. And when you do that in a mass casualty, you're gonna lose people. It's an accepted fact. And so we try to do our best with what we have. And I think, yes, it is kind of a shit show, but it doesn't mean that we're not working hard to get to the highest priorities.
It's you do your best.
Yeah. And that's what we can all do. Just do our best to push things forward, make things the best we can. And that's the part that I have trouble communicating back home to everyone, is like every day you wake up and you don't know what your day is going to be like, but you're happy that your day is like that. And then whatever comes and you deal with it. And then you get home and you're like, all right, I'm going to rest and recover and we're going to do this again.
I like to think I'm like Zen. But it's like wait and see.
Yeah.
Wait and see.
Yeah.
You're gonna whatever comes, you'll do it.
Yeah. And that's the mentality of the people I really like to work with here, is no matter what happens, you're gonna do the work that day. You're not gonna complain. You're not gonna get derailed emotionally because something didn't go your way. We're gonna focus on the task at hand. We came here to do a job and we'll do the job.
Butterfly ultrasound.
Yes.
You're Mr. Butterfly. Mr. Butterfly Ukraine. I want to start a butterfly fundraiser.
Yeah.
And I may need your help. I may find someone in Sweden who will help. It's hard to get. It's a hard concept. There's medical professionals here who, I'm not the best spoken person in the world, but I can convey very easily why something is
of
needed.
course. Yeah.
That's a gift I do have. And I'm going to shoot for 10 or 20 because I can do shit like that. You know, I'm
Go for it.
Yeah. There's a few things in this car that are small and black and cost a couple $1,000, you know. How important do you think an ultrasound is for all levels of care here?
It's super important. First, if you're trying to triage multiple people at once and you're trying to figure out who's going to be the first ambulance to the hospital, it's a tool that you could use really easily. It takes less than 2 minutes to do an EFAST if you get proficient at it. The other part, not only from triage, but it helps you guide procedures. So putting in a central line, so internal jugular, even subclavian, femoral, so much easier with an ultrasound. Faster, quicker, makes life easier. It's safer.
Yes.
Much safer. And then same thing, if you just need an IV, you can do it under ultrasound. If you need a nerve block to get somebody who may have an amputation below the knee or a hip fracture, or maybe has a bad arm injury, if you know how to do regional anesthesia, which is much better and safer with an ultrasound, that's the way to go. So not only is it helping you triage, helping you put in life-saving catheters, but you're relieving people's suffering. And you can do that with one device. You need a phone, and you need a butterfly, you need some gel, and you can do a lot of things.
Yeah, you can. You really can.
Yeah. And so I think for me as an emergency medicine doctor, I can't imagine practicing without one. I couldn't do most of the stuff I do. In fact, like every time I go see a patient, I'm like, hey, I'm going to ultrasound this for you. And so there's a lot going on. And the same thing, the feedback I get from the surgeons and anesthesiologists that I trained before when I was here last, I think they're pulling out shrapnel minimally invasively because they can find the shrapnel on ultrasound. They can put their instrument in the entrance wound and pull out that instead of making a 4 or 5 centimeter incision.
Yes.
So, and that to me is a huge thing. It's a great thing for that soldier who's injured and, probably already has enough going on. It makes their life a lot easier. And it provides so much to the patient and it makes life easier. And it's really, what's the word I want to say? Like the reason it's portable, it's literally an ultrasound and a phone, and everyone
can be used anywhere. Yeah. On stay point, on hospital, on an ambulance.
And I don't want to take away from this. Like, ultrasound does take time to master, but you went through a day course with me, and you can teach EFAST.
Yeah, well, that's pretty shit simple.
Yeah,
unless he's fat.
Yeah,
it's like
but the point is,
I don't mean to slimly challenge people. because all you see is white.
Yeah. So but the thing is like if you
That skinny girl, I was like, ooh, that's a heart, that's a liver, that's a spleen. I was like, I'm shit hot.
yeah, but if you get those easy cases, then you get better at the harder cases.
Yeah.
And so that's the skill level, like the introductory of like, hey, I can find the heart, I can find the liver, the spleen, the bladder, I can look at lung sliding. Well, that's all the basics of ultrasound. Like if you need to find a blood vessel, oh, you're looking for black stuff. That's easy to find. You're trying to find a nerve. Oh, that's a bunch of white stuff. That's easy to find now. And you get the mechanics of actually using the ultrasound. Like that's the big thing. Like if you get introduced to the EFAS and you can master that, then you can master pretty much any ultrasound thing. And like you don't have any medical background. You didn't come from the world I came from, but yet you can take an ultrasound now and you can show other people EFAS, which is the #1 ultrasound in trauma.
Well, just the simplest thing, like when Taras, because he's very competent, and I just told him like because he works someone in a hospital with the butterfly, and I remember you guys and other people, if you're struggling to see, put a bit more pressure. You know what I mean, more than you were used to, because it is limited. But if you can, you know, and our first casualty of the night. Well, first we had fun with Roma. We used him. You know what I mean. We just and you make your own fun, you know, and stabilization when it's quiet. But our first guy, and this is beyond me, I had to Google it afterwards and research it. Subcapsular hematoma on the spleen, blood on the spleen.
Yep.
And that was our first casualty that night, and they hadn't had an ultrasound in like 3 months. So imagine how many guys, high volume. I would say 5 to 6 weeks in Kherson was my most consistent, not my busiest work day by day, but consistently the busiest work I've ever done. And they didn't have an ultrasound.
Yeah. The important part is getting the experience, right? And so, you know, that's why I like I live in Dnipro.
Yes.
And I can access training easily. I get asked regularly for training. And so having more ultrasounds, it's more people trained.
And they let their doctors, they give them leeway to come up to Dnipro, like from Zaporizhia, from Donbass for training?
Wherever they need to come from. I usually
find a way.
Yeah, they find a way. And we make it happen. I'm fortunate, like, you know, I have some really good close contacts in Dnipro for translating or interpreting. So that's very helpful. But yeah, no, any tool that I can get my hands on to help other people learn, I can put it to good use. And that's why I actually let you loan my ultrasound, because I still need it back to keep training others.
But you weren't using it at the time.
I wasn't using it at the time.
Well, if you want, I can put your social media details, because you have your PayPal on there now too, where people see you used to send me, it's like, ooh, Dr. Donnelly sent me $800. It's like, nice, you know what I mean? And Casey and they were like, yeah, score. And it's like, now you're here, now you're a broke ass, you know, but you're happy.
Yeah, no, this is where I need to be, and that is freeing, and that's nice to know that every day I wake up and do something that's going to make a difference somewhere. And it's not always easily seen, but I trust that, you know, I'm here for a reason, just like you, just like everyone else.
Anyway,
can I share one story?
go on.
All right. We were in Kupiansk earlier this year.
Okay.
And it was a Saturday, and they were having a clinic with Frida. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're a group that takes primary care doctors out to the deoccupied areas.
Okay.
They were in Kupiansk, and so I went and worked with them, and I was seeing patients. And they're like, great, you have your interpreter, go see patients. I said, great. So a lot of babusias with lots of pain.
Yes.
And there was one I was talking to, and she said her age. She was like 77. And I was like, no way, you look like you're like 65.
Oh, you flirt.
And then the interpreter said that to her, and she had this biggest smile on her face, and then she started crying. And she's like, I haven't smiled since the war started. And I was just like, oh, I'm going to start getting a little teared up too. And then we figured out what was going on with her, gave her some advice, and at the end she's like, can I give you a hug? And I was like, of course you can. And so I didn't do a lot of medicine. I didn't really prescribe anything, but just sitting and talking to people sometimes can make a huge difference.
That glove box used to be loaded with chocolate. But I stopped doing it because you'd run out of chocolate. And after you gave out like 50, and like the 51st babushka would be there, and she'd look at you with hatred.
Oh, it's tough.
Yeah, and then she'd call in. She was a Russian supporter. She'd call in a mortar on me.
But yeah, no, that's
rewarding, isn't it? Working with them.
Yeah,
like going out to the villages.
Yeah, and that is that's why I love Ukraine. Like everywhere you go, if you break through that first little shell and you get them to open up a little bit, the most wonderful people I've ever met. And I've, you know,
They are, and the way they laugh, and
and because you go from such a flat effect to this big, joyous, nice, like rosy red cheeks, teary eye. And it's just, I love seeing it. So thanks for letting me share that.
no, it's I want people to have the best. Like what you're doing here, what I can do with supplies just by being there. There's countless volunteers, Ukrainian, and God bless the army doctors.
Yeah.
Who stay on those posts whether they got no work for a week or they work for 2 months straight.
Yeah.
We just have to make it better and better, because we all owe them. This is philosophical, Brandon, but like we had in the army we were taught about. I never thought about it as a kid, but like we were taught when we signed our contract, the soldier's covenant, and what the covenant was that if anything should ever happen to you, we will do the best we possibly can for you, to save you and to give you the best possible outcome. And the reality is the best possible outcome that Ukraine is capable of providing alone is not. It's nowhere near what we could do, but what we're doing, they deserve a lot more, and it will never be enough. It will never be enough. But it's like you and me, we're part of that.
Yeah.
But it was called the soldier's covenant, that a soldier could go to Iraq, Afghanistan, and whatever would happen to him, that he would have the best possible care. And they deserve the best.
Agreed.
And you're doing pretty shit hot.
Try my best.
You are.
Try my best. I'm just one person.
Yeah, I know you are, but I like it because you're kind of rogue. You're a little bit rogue like me, but you're not as rogue as me.
I'm a rebel. I can get that from my dad.
Yeah.
He's always been a rebel. I just, you know.
Well, you're Irish. You're a
A
Donnelly.
little bit I actually found out I'm a little Ukrainian too, so I'm happy about that.
Did you?
Yeah, I did the 23andMe. Nice little surprise.
What's that? You order like
A
a...
little maswab.
Oh, we did one for my dog. We found out there was no poodle in it. Maybe I'll order that one. It's cheaper.
Yeah.
All right.
So, but yeah, happy.
I'm going to go
be
get
here.
some sleep.
Yeah, sleep well.
It was really cool hanging out today with
of
you and
course.
your interns. Yeah. Are they students or interns?
They're residents, second year residents. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, They have
okay.
one more year left, and then they're
Off to the front. And it's cool. It's so cool because they're doctors, but they're clean and they're hipster. Like, you know, like what Western doctors are like. The doctors that I know are like got a cigarette hanging out of their mouth and they look like death. They've got all that waiting for them.
Yeah, they do.
But
But they're young and got all the energy, so they'll be great.
Of course they will. Best anesthesiologist I've ever seen, Nikolai Nikolaevich. He's probably only 31 now. You know, he's a legend in Ukrainian Army Medical. And how many years ago was he a resident? Look at him now.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll see you soon, brother.
All right, sounds good.
Do you want to say goodbye? Do you want to make any statements?
No, it's funny. I'm like on the spot thinking. No, I think
Toaster, lamp.
nah.
I love lamp.
I love that. No, I think what we all do here is for the best of Ukraine, and I think when we keep that in focus, we're gonna get there.
I do believe in victory. It's not looking good right now, but
It never looks good until it's over.
it's ups and downs.
Of course, it's life.
I'm gonna turn this shit off.